Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Fort Wayne Local Podcast. I'm your host, Jake McAfee. Today, our special guest is Casey Steinbacher. Casey, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jake.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about Electric Works today, the GE campus in downtown Fort Wayne. Before we jump into that, I kind of want to give people a little bit of background about you, just so we know why we should listen to you. So after graduating from Penn State, you became the City of Williamsport's Community and Economic Director. You then moved up to the CEO of Lycoming County Chamber of Commerce. Then you took your talents to Palm Beach and became the CEO of Palm Beach North Chamber of Commerce, and then found your home as the Greater Durham Chamber of Commerce President. You retired in 2015 and started your own company, Casey's Company, which is a consulting company for businesses, economic development, Chamber of Commerce. You're also the executive director of Made in Durham, which is a partnership of government, educators, and businesses to help get all of Durham's youth on track for success through education and then into a career. So, and then also your most prestigious title, this is the most important one, you're my mother-in-law. So you should feel very special for that.
Which, by the way, is the reason for you to listen to me, not necessarily the rest of your audience too, but yeah.
Well, now we're just splitting hairs. So, so before we jump in, I want to give people a quick backstory on the General Electric campus so we know why it's important, why it's going to affect us. So it's located just southwest of downtown Fort Wayne. It's 39 acres, 18 historical buildings, and 1.2 million square feet. It's highlighted by brick exteriors, large open spaces, wood plank ceilings, and even a bowling alley, which is pretty cool. So General Electric came to Fort Wayne around the turn of the 20th century after acquiring Fort Wayne Electric Company. At its peak in the 1940s, during World War II, it employed 40% of our city's workforce, which was over 20,000 people. I think they said 1 in 9 people in Fort Wayne had worked there. They manufactured electric parts, motors, transformers that were vital during World War II. Currently, as it sits, it's very dilapidated, broken windows, just a dangerous eyesore for the community. And what's been happening is RTM Ventures, they're a real estate developer that has been tabbed to bring it back to life, really. They want to keep the space, keep the soul of the space, keep some of its history, but while renovating into a few different things. They want to have an innovation center, which is going to help entrepreneurs flourish with flexible co-working space and special programs to support them. They want anchor institutions with educational and research opportunities, health and fitness opportunities, residential, retail, food hall, office space. And the reason, that's been a very controversial thing is they want $65 million from the city in order to fund it. And they'll get that, as of right now, the way it stands, they'll get that if they meet certain leasing and private financing thresholds. Most recently, they secured Do It Best as their anchor tenant, and they're going to relocate their headquarters to GE if this thing works. So I guess we'll start with you. What are your ties to Electric Works?
So back when I was the CEO of the Durham Chamber of Commerce, Eric Doden, who at the time was the executive director of the state of Indiana's Economic Development Corporation, came to Durham to study a similar kind of project that we have here in Durham called the American Tobacco Campus. He had contracted with a consulting company out of Pittsburgh to identify on behalf of the state 10 communities across the United States that had done a really good job in the whole concept of place-based economic development. In other words, using your sense of place and to really create the kind of new community you want your citizens to have, and you want to use to recruit talent to your community. And so he came here to study this campus at the time. I was the president of the chamber, took him around, had some conversations. And from that time on, I think I was engaged with Fort Wayne on a couple of initiatives, on a couple of times that we got engaged in conversations because from Eric's perspective, he felt very strongly that of all the places he looked at, this particular place, Durham, and specifically this project at American Tobacco, was so close to what Fort Wayne was looking at in terms of where we were 10 years ago, where Fort Wayne is today, in terms of both where you're at in your economic development activity and where you were at in terms of the physical space that you had. So he thought it was most likely that what we learned here would be replicable in Fort Wayne. So I came up a few times, did a couple of sessions with some people there, both local leaders, addressed a state group as well, and have been up once or twice since then, in addition to occasionally coming to see my grandchildren.
Best time of the year. So, so let's start with right now, present time. Tell us about American Tobacco Campus. Like, what happened? What's going on there? What type of age groups? Like, what are the activities? Like, give us the current state of where it's at.
Yeah, so for those, I'll just do a real recap, Jake, just in case somebody aren't familiar with American Tobacco Campus. It's very, very similar to what it is you just described about GE. So it's an old American Tobacco facility. It was a manufacturing and warehousing facility for the American Tobacco Company. It was in its entirety at one point was about 1.2, 1.3 million square feet. In the 1980s, it closed down and sat here empty for 20 plus years. In eyesore, dilapidated, trees growing through the roof, the whole 9 yards. Eventually was bought by a local developer who has since renovated it, and it has become, it's now about it's 1.3 million now still. We lost about a 300,000 worth of square foot on the actual main campus, but across the street, additional construction that is relevant to the campus still brings it back to about 1.3 million square feet. So who's on here now? By the way, I should say to you, of the 1.3 million square feet, it is 98% rented constantly. You only get in American Tobacco when American Tobacco has a lease runs out and they choose to move forward or move out, and American Tobacco is able to move you in somehow. It is mostly technology related companies, which was part of the plan when it was first brought on board to engage technology companies, but it also includes Duke University. It includes a Duke corporate education as well. But it's mostly technology related companies, along with all the service related kind of companies that would come with that. Now we have restaurants here. We have radio stations here, foundations that run programs here as well. So it's very young. The average age in Durham, just so you know, is only 32 years old. That was not the case back in 2000 when this project was started. It has substantially helped bring a very young creative class to Durham and keep the creatives that we have here in Durham.
So that's important for people to know too, because I know for the longest time, a lot of people from Fort Wayne would go up to college and get educated and then go to Indianapolis, go to Chicago, go to Cincinnati even. I have a lot of friends in those cities. So I think that's kind of at the core of what we're talking about here. So going back to now that we know what it is now, take us back to the beginning then when you talked about the condition that was in. What exactly were your ties to that project when you first started?
Well, actually early on, this project actually started before I came to Durham. I was involved, which I'll talk a little bit about in the second iteration of it. Because that's the beauty of this project. It's constantly iterating itself. Once you get involved in this kind of work, it's fun to be involved in what is next. You're just constantly looking at what is next. What did it look like? Well, it's really actually started with the Durham Bulls baseball stadium, which is, everyone knows the Durham Bulls, just like it was in the movies, was actually filmed here. That is in Durham, in downtown Durham. And that stadium, a local company, Capital Broadcasting, the CEO of that company decided that he wanted to buy the Bulls and turn them into something. I'm making a very long story short, but to do that, he needed a new stadium. The city agreed to build a new stadium for him in order to keep the Bulls in town. He built that stadium directly across the street from the American Tobacco campus. And what happened was they built that beautiful stadium. 10,000 people come in every night to watch baseball games and stare at a building that was empty, boarded up, trees growing through it. Literally the only activity going here was the Durham Police Department using it to do SWAT kind of training, and the fire department to do fire training. And so he decided that he needed to do something to really not only just protect his investment, but really as an opportunity to do something for Durham. So long and the short of it, they got us together with a lot of but not key partners in Durham, Duke University being one, McKinney agency, which is a very large advertising agency that competes with agencies in New York City, and convinced them to actually be part of a partnership to do something with this facility. And they started that they bought it in 2000. It took them till, and this is important for your audience to understand, once they started, it took them till 2004 to even open. I mean, it's a long, arduous process. And since that time, since it's opened, it's iterated many times over. What I got involved in it is in 2007, what was happening was we were starting to get some technology companies coming to Durham. They were very interested in this kind of creative space because that's what their talent, that's what their employees really wanted, not the typical office space. But they couldn't necessarily afford large amounts of space here in Durham, large leases, because they're small. A lot of them are startups. And so what we were able to do is literally build out the basements of the American Tobacco complex and created what we called American Underground because it was in the basement. And we put in small 30-day lease spaces in the basement. And it immediately filled up, about 40 within the first year, to the point where I can tell you today, American Underground actually has 4 locations in Durham, three of them outside of the American Tobacco campus, up the street a little ways on Main Street. So my plan, my engagement with them was really around the whole, how do we use this space to leverage not just the creative class, but to leverage entrepreneurship and people wanting to start up their own business.
That's beautiful. And kind of going back to you mentioning, the ballpark, like from where I sit right now, I can see the TinCap Stadium and then the top of the GE campus. So we do kind of have that synergy
Yep.
there. Not quite as close, but walkable for sure. So, so when you got started, did the project have public support, or at least when you got involved, was the public supporting it, or was there some controversy?
Oh God. Well, yeah, first of all, we're in Durham, so there's controversy in everything we do here in Durham. But yeah, it really did. And so one of the things that there had been a lot of projects that had been proposed for this space before Jim did it, and none of them panned out. So immediately when Capital Broadcasting came in and wanted to do it, it was just, this is just another project, right?
Yeah.
It also, by the way, followed up a project to do the public space, the new Durham Bulls Stadium. The new Durham Bulls Stadium, when they first proposed to do that, they went out on a county-wide referendum to raise the money to actually do the stadium, and it failed miserably. 73% of the population of Durham said, don't do it, and voted it down. So just so you know, yes, of course, there's always that initial trepidation. This is just a money pit. This is just developers trying to make money. This is public dollars. Why should we do that? It is a natural inclination of citizens in a community. What they were able to do, though, was put in a lot of protections in place so that the public money that actually went into these projects went in after they were able to demonstrate the commitments that they were actually going to be here and perform on what it is that they were going to be doing. And a lot of it was, quite frankly, tax credits, that didn't necessarily cost direct cash, but was tax credits that were applied to the project when it was done.
Okay. And yeah, we went through the same thing here. So when they built the TinCap Stadium 10 years ago, we already had Wizard Stadium over off Coliseum, which is, there's nothing around, it's not walkable, but everybody said, we have a baseball stadium. Why do we need another baseball stadium?
Right.
And there's lots and lots of pushback, and it's been a smash hit that's kind of spurred all this. It's really been the catalyst. So was there a turning point? Like, what helped get this project approved for you guys down there?
Well, I do think it came within 5 years after the Durham Bulls. So the Durham Bulls, I would say to you, by that time was already ridiculously successful. It had gone from a single A franchise all the way to a triple A franchise in just those first 5 or 6 years. The stadium was packed. It was doing incredibly well. And the owner, therefore, had a really good reputation, right, as someone that could do this development. So when they proposed to come over here, while there was not a lot of support for it at first, I think people started to get comfortable with the developer over time. And then the second thing is that the public financing in this particular project ended up being financing associated with what you would call public pieces of it. And what I mean by that is the financing, the direct cash contributions coming from the city and the county paid for all the parking decks associated with it, because when you're a developer and you're doing a project, you're required by zoning to also provide parking for what it is you're doing. Parking is very expensive nowadays in terms of the per space cost. And so what the city decided to do was, look, we have all this other public stuff going on, Durham Bulls. We have some ideas of other public things we want to put in this area. We're going to build the parking deck. So they literally 100% built and took off of the plate of the developer a large amount of financing associated with it. And then I think that also got the community more comfortable, so that when the other financing came to the project, it was easier to swallow. People felt good about it.
Okay. And then how did the Great Recession affect it? Did that slow it up at all? Because I think there's some rumblings here of like, how's this going to move forward with what's going on with coronavirus? We know public funding is going to be affected. I don't even think we've really felt the effect of it yet. But with that coming, did you guys have any, I think you said you got involved in 2007. So how did that affect it?
I think that's a very legitimate question. I would say to you that by 2008, in Durham's a very, if you do any research on Durham's a very, is a very, as close to recession proof as you can come. And when I say that, no one is going to be recession proof from COVID by far, but it has a very diverse industry sector. Research Triangle Park is in Durham. And 80% of it is in Durham. And so we're the kind of community where the last into a recession and the first out of a recession typically. So recession really didn't hit us until, late 8, 9.
Okay.
By that time, I think American Tobacco campus was pretty solid. And it definitely saw some recession related activities, but never to the point where it was not, fully rented or able to continue to operate. It just had to pull back a little on its community related pieces of what it is it did. And it did, and I did do some, rent concessions to some of the tenants that were already here with long-term leases, right? So that they could put some of the some of the rent concessions on the back end. But no, it was, quite frankly, I will tell you, it was a sense of pride during the recession that we still had this kind of place to come to. It is a physically beautiful place, what it is that they've actually done to an old brick manufacturing location. You've been here, you've known, you see it. It is the kind of place that people came to be part of and feel good about your community.
Okay, that's exactly what we're looking for. And then this is a little technical, and I know it was a while ago, but do you remember the tax revenue from before you started to what it is now?
Well,
I know I'm putting you on the spot there.
No, I actually can't tell you real numbers. I do not remember that. And I should have looked that up for you, and I did not. But I can tell you it was zero. I mean, when this was in bankruptcy, this was literally sitting around generating nothing. And so where it's at right now, it is a high performing location. It is a high rental rate to actually be here. It is a high tax producing entity, both in terms of real estate taxes and in terms of sales and use tax, because of all the other things. Jake didn't even get into after 2004 when this opened. It then spurred additional. We have a state of the art across the street. At one end is the Durham Bulls Stadium. At the other end is the Durham Performing Arts Center, which literally the city again invested in. It's city owned but privately run. And that facility generates somewhere between $1 million and $6 million a year to the bottom line of the city right now, as not just tax revenue on what it is that they're doing there. I mean, on a sales revenue. In other words, they are partners with the private sector operating it. And at the end of the year, they split the profit associated with running that organization. And last year they split $6 million, which is unheard of for performing arts. That would not have happened without the American Tobacco campus being across the street.
Okay, and I wanted to say that because, a big pushback is why are we spending government dollars for something that is privately owned? But, the projections I've read, they've said that like right now the campus here is generating, I think, around $120,000 a year, and they're anticipating between like 7 and 8 million a year in revenue. So,
Yeah,
you
I
invest
could.
the 65 million and then you recoup it over 9 years.
It's exactly right. And they have, yes, and that's exactly what happened here. And it happens in most good economic development projects. You're able to, you basically, if you have to look at this as investing in it, not subsidizing it, right? You're investing in it because you get the money back. Plus it provides, and not just in real estate fees, it provides such a ripple effect. Every restaurant here has lots of people employed that may
Yeah.
not have been employed had that not been the case, this not been renovated, as an example.
Okay, and that was, so one of my questions was, what are some of the unanticipated benefits? So it sounds like some of the unanticipated stuff was just the additional growth, like
Right.
the pride that maybe some of it's intangible, and then the growth that continued with the momentum.
Yeah, I would say there's two other ones that I would tell you about. One is that they did a fabulous job of creating the space, the green space that's here. They made, even though it's privately owned, the community of Durham believes they own it. They've done such a fabulous job of doing public things here all summer long. There's concert series on the lawn. There's not a Saturday. I actually live in American Tobacco
Mm-hmm.
campus. I live on campus. There's not a Saturday I get up where I'm not looking out my window at a birthday party, a graduation initiative. It's a beautiful campus that really invites the community to come be part of it free of charge in a whole bunch of different ways. And then the second thing it did, it just, quite frankly, I don't know how your audience will understand this at first. It's hard to wrap your head around, but the vibe it created for Durham as a cool, innovative, urban feel kind of place, but in not a large city. So you get young creatives that, like you said, go to college. Let's just say go to college at Duke right here in Durham, take off and go to New York City or Washington, D.C., live in a 400 square foot room closet with 6 other people to be able to afford it for 5 years and say, God, I can't do this anymore, but I love the urban feel. So they come to Durham regularly. They come to Durham. They now live in a 1,000-foot apartment by themselves, get a great job in Durham, and still can hang out at places that feel like they're in an urban setting and are cool and creative and engage a broader, diverse kind of community. And that is really helped Durham create the kind of vibe that when we're attracting other companies to come here, the first thing they say to us is, what kind of place is Durham in terms of my ability to get the talent I want and keep the talent there, because it's the kind of community they want to live in. And all we do is take them and walk them through downtown Durham, and they're like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, this is, in addition to showing them all the numbers, they're like, I'm in. And I'll just give you an example. Since March, we've announced 3 new life science companies coming to Durham. 3 new life science, 2,600 jobs announcements in the last 3 months.
I hope everyone heard that. I really want that to sink in. Like that's the whole point behind. I guess there's 2 points. One is I'm really glad to hear you talk about the vibe, because I feel like Fort Wayne has so much momentum right now where there's a pride we've never seen,
I agree with that. Jake, when they brought me up there and started showing me around before you moved back, I remember them taking me along the riverfront and saying, we got this vision. We're going to get rid of the scrub. We're going to create this riverfront. And they all turned and looked at me, and I literally looked at them and said, seriously, you flew me up here to ask me whether that's a good idea? Hell yeah, that's a good idea. Go do it. Fort Wayne is a cool city. I say this, Fort Wayne has the bones necessary to be a cool city.
Well said. And I feel like we have so much momentum, and I feel like this project is like what's really going to push us, to the next level. And then also coming back to, this is all about long-term viability and keeping our city competitive, where people want to be here, all different types of people, not just someone who's looking for inexpensive housing or likes parks. We want to attract young, educated talent who's looking for something to do. They don't want to, just hang out and chill. They want to go and be able to have walkable bars, go to meetings, like a live, work, play thing. And I feel like this embodies it. What's something you think could have been done better about the American tobacco? Like if you had it to do over again, what's something that you would maybe do differently?
Yeah, that's really an interesting question. I would say to you, if you ask this of the company right now that owns it, and I do a lot of work with Capital Broadcasting, they're a phenomenal family and do a ton of work in Durham. I would say to you that they, along with everyone else, were really worried. They believed in what it is they were doing. They knew they were in it for the long haul, right? They didn't expect to have a rate of return tomorrow. They knew it was going to take some time. They did a lot of long-term leases for organizations that they put in here to create some stability. They did not plan for success. And because they had such immediate success, they had some companies in here, or they had some tenants in here, all good tenants. But as this kind of really started to create this new vibe, it took them longer, I think, to be able to end those leases and bring in those new companies that they really wanted. Like when we bid on Apple and Amazon to come here when they were both looking at it, and we could not put enough space together here to be able to accommodate them coming here, because we didn't have it built and available because we had too many long-term leases here. And so I would say to you, plan for success. Plan that this is going to be a success. People don't do that. Actually, it's Durham's biggest problem right now. We have a big problem with affordable housing because it just went through the roof. I know that's good for a realtor to know, but housing went through the roof. And so it's really hard for us because we never for a million years expected to be as successful as we've been. So plan for success.
Okay, and then I want to talk about a couple more objections that I just, I read them in the comment sections. I have them with some of my friends and stuff like that when we're sitting around. And I was listening to, it was an older interview. It was Mayor Tom Henry's podcast, but he said one of the biggest things was, one of his biggest hurdles was that the developers didn't have any skin in the game. So he felt like they didn't have anything to lose. What do you say to that? Is that normal? Is this just a negotiation, or what do you think?
Well, I would say to you, all developers have skin in the game. Whether it just depends how you define skin in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in a typical financing plan, how can I explain? So when you're a developer and you're doing a project, there is risk associated with doing the project, right? At the end of the day, you own that project and you're liable for its success or lack of success, right? So what you usually use, if you think about it this way, think about it from the perspective of what you use public financing to do. So when I'm a developer and I'm doing this, no developer has a ton of skin in the game originally. You go out and you raise that money, right? You get investors to come in and help invest in this. When you're asking an investor to invest in a community like Durham was when we started this, and like Fort Wayne is now, that's riskier, right? It's not a primary location. It's considered a tertiary, secondary investment. And when you do a secondary, tertiary investment, an investor wants a higher rate of return because there's a higher, greater risk that it's not going to work out. Sure. So a owner like this has to guarantee them, instead of maybe a 5, 6, 7% return, has to guarantee them a 12% return. So that's the risk the owner is taking, right? The developer is taking, that they're going to be able to provide that rate of return to this investor. What you use public financing for is to write down that risk, and so that it becomes easier to meet that rate of return, right? So your financing means, okay, I'm not spending as much money up front, so I can guarantee that higher rate of return to the investor. I know that sounds a little complicated, but that's basically what, if you are a developer of large commercial projects that require large investments, investor engagement in a tertiary city, it's going to cost you more money to go get that money and bring it in, because they can go to New York City and get 5% and not think twice, right? Mm-hmm. No risk. So that's basically what most people don't understand. When you're doing this, that risk is on the owner. To be able to give them that. So what you're trying to do with the public money is write down that risk. So you can convince these investors to come in and invest in it.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I tell people, it's a very exciting project, and I really hope it happens. In Orlando, there's 10 of those going
Yeah.
on,
Right.
so at the same time, if we're going to entice somebody to come here, you also, you got to factor in your leverage. So,
Hmm.
and then with the city contributing 65 million, I don't know if it's true that there was rumors that the developers were going to make 16 million. So I know we've just put some of that into context. Um, but I think when some people just hear that city spends 65, developers make 16, they think that that's us being ripped off as the taxpayers, with no context. But can you maybe add some context to that, or do you think that's a bad deal? I mean, what's
Well,
your
first
thoughts?
of all, I don't, I would not comment on that, not actually seeing the numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would never make any assumptions that that's true or not true. So let me just say that. Is it common? Is it common for investors to make money? Yeah, that's what they do. Let me just put this into context for you. When a guy builds a shopping center, he builds it to make money. He puts
Sure.
tenants in there and he makes money off of that. What they're objecting to is that the city is putting this investment in and the developer gets to make money off of it. The city does too. The
Yeah.
city makes real estate money. The city makes sales and use tax money. The city makes additional that property tax money because all of the houses in the neighborhood surrounding it now sell for twice as much money. It's an investment. It's not a fee. It's not them putting money in. It's them investing money so that they can make money just like the developer does. The key is, and I don't know, I would not comment on this project without seeing the numbers. The key is just to make sure that the investment is the rate of return to both the city and the developer is fair.
Yeah, I have the same conversation regularly when people talk about my commission when I'm selling a house. I say, at the end of the day, your goal is to make your money, not limit mine, because maybe we can both get what we want, and everybody's happy.
Exactly right. It's exactly right. But yeah, there's a lot of risk in real estate development.
For sure. Okay. And I've had more questions. We've pretty much covered most of them. Just to kind of wrap it up, what would you say is one big takeaway? Like, if just one point you really want to drive home to Fort Wayne residents about a project like this?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you asked that question because having been at Fort Wayne and seen it, I'm going to go back to the Fort Wayne. It has the bones to be an incredible community. What you have to understand is you're never going to reach your potential if you're not able to understand what the kind of things that you have to do in order to be able to create that vibrancy in a community. What your community is trying to do right now is figure out how to keep and bring talent into your community. People that are going to continue to pay taxes, continue to build homes, continue to hire realtors, continue to go to grocery stores, all those businesses there, right? All those businesses need customers, right? And so what brought Eric to Durham in the first place was that he looked at the rate of growth in the state of Indiana in the first place. He looked at the growth of communities and literally the growth rate was births over deaths in a community. You can't survive economically on births over deaths. You have to have this kind of vibrant community that people want to come to and be part of. And so these are the kind of projects that you do to create that sense of vibrancy for yourself and for all those eventual customers that are going to come into your community and support you to be able to make a living in the community that you live in, be your friends, be your children's friends. This isn't a real estate deal. This is a investment in the kind of community that we want to be. And that's what I would say to everybody. That's the missing piece, but people see this as trust your elected officials, or economic development officials that you have in place that work with companies all over the world. This is the way it happens, and you can safeguard it. You can make it Fort Wayne worthy, right? But you still have to do it.
Amen. Well said. That was a beautiful bow put on that. I guess the last thing I want to finish with is what I ask everyone. What's your favorite thing about Fort Wayne?
Oh, you and the kids.
That was a layup. That was a layup.
You and the kid.
Well,
Matter of fact, I did my Facebook portal this morning with Miss Caroline,
oh, that's
telling me all about what she was going to do today. So,
like herding cats there. Well, Casey, thank you for your time. This was amazing. This is something that talking about it gets me fired up sometimes. So I feel like this was beautiful how we could just cover all these things all at once. I appreciate that. And I want to do a little teaser. We're going to do a part 2. I want to come back and talk about what you're doing now with your life, because I think that could serve as an inspiration to some. So seriously, thank you for taking the time to do this.
anytime, my pleasure. Can't wait to
Absolutely.
get back to Fort Wayne.
For sure. We're welcoming you back. All right. See ya.
Bye.